The excellent advisors have great relationships, always have, always will have. My experience, 40 years of working, most people, including people in business, including people that are relatively successful, don't do. They don't follow up and they don't act with urgency. I say, if you just do those two things, you're ahead of so many people. SUSUFU, set up, show up, follow up.
The AI wave is not the first time advisors have been told they're getting replaced. First, it was the end of commissions, then index funds, then robo-advisors, then fee compression. Every decade brings a new reason the advisor is supposedly becoming obsolete. But the firms and the advisors that survive are usually not the ones that defend the old model. They are the ones that understand what is changing and what is not, and where human advice still matters. Today's guest is Rich Ryffel, Executive Director of Business Leadership and Professor in Practice at Purdue's Mitch Daniels School of Business, who's been at this for 35 years. We talk industry history, unreasonable hospitality, and whether wealth management is still a profession young people should seriously consider. Let's get into it with Rich. Thank you so much for doing this podcast. You and I have known each other for going on 10-ish years now. And we met in St. Louis when you were running wealth management at First Bank. You stuck out to me as someone I would like to work for, a really good leader. And you've been around the block in wealth management. So I wanted to pick your brain. Welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I was old then. I'm older now. And thank you for those kind words about me. Thanks for hosting me on this. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and I'm fresh off, doing a guest lecture for you at Purdue, where you're teaching. Is it undergrads and grad students right now, or just grad students?
The class you spoke in is my graduate sales management class, but I do teach an undergraduate finance class, and actually, for the first time this year, I taught a undergraduate immersion class in Washington, D.C. called Freedom, Capitalism, and Institutions, which was quite fun.
That's great. All right. So going back, 3-ish decades, A.G. Edwards, JP, First Bank, you've seen a few of these cycles of robos and brokerage fees and advisors. We're not going to need advisors. Is what we're seeing with AI right now, does that feel different to you in any way, shape, or form? Or is this just another cycle that seems to happen every, decade or a couple decades?
Well, I'll give you kind of a classic economist's answer. On the one hand, on the other hand. So it's very similar to what we saw with the .com and the introduction of the internet. So that's how old I am. I can remember back when the internet was a new thing. And you referenced A.G. Edwards. I was there at the time. And everybody thought for sure that was going to disintermediate every advisor, that everything would be done over a website. And notably then, two amazing St. Louis firms, A.G. Edwards and another one, Edward Jones, that I also had the privilege of working at for a while. They were very retail focused. And at the time, so this is like 95, they said, we're not going to let our clients interact with us on the internet. We'll have information out on the internet, but we're not going to let them trade. We're not going to become E-Trade or, any of the other ones that have been since subsumed. There were many dozens of firms that were started to do online trading. And they just said, we're not going to do that. And to this day, those firms largely don't allow you to do those kinds of things. You can look up your account, you can get information, maybe you can do some rudimentary planning, you can get some education, but they don't allow kind of the do-it-yourselfers. So I say that because, first of all, the .com boom did not disintermediate excellent advisors. So that's one thing. And then the other thing, like those two firms, and there were others, putting a stake in the ground and saying, we're not going to change the way we do business. We do business one-on-one, face-to-face, human to human, and that's the way we're going to continue. We'll leverage the internet where we can. So, fast forward 30 years, they're still basically doing that. And, they've grown a multiple larger than they were then. So it's similar in that sense. I think you see firms still saying, we're not, historically, no technology really disintermediates everybody. And we've got to keep the human in the loop, if you will. So we're going to continue that way. And that case that I wrote about Edward Jones and the way they're using AI, is a testament to that. They're going to use AI to leverage their advisors and take some of the drudgery out of it. What's different about it, though, so I said on the one hand, on the other hand, what's different is I think AI has the potential to impact many more areas. So not just in wealth management and financial services, but so many things, healthcare, et cetera.
General purpose.
Yeah, general purpose. And to do it with a deeper, more, I'll use the word sentient, but I don't mean it literally, because people, I think, have these horror story ideas that AI is going to become sentient and take over the world. But, from using AI, it can do some pretty amazing things that you might have asked a human to do a couple of years ago. So I think that's different. And I do think if advisors and firms are not thinking about how do they preserve their value proposition, how do they educate their advisors to embrace the technology, and how does the business need to change to take advantage of AI, they will be left behind. And that's the $64,000 question, which is causing all these firms to spend a ton of money on AI right now, is I think they're casting about trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Do you think the sort of no matter what, because you referenced when you said it didn't disintermediate all advisors, and you said especially I think you said excellent advisors. So do you think the excellent advisor going back 25 years and the excellent advisor today are similar in that they have a growth mindset, they're looking for, different ways to add value, or is that profile changing? Because I had a chance to work with your wealth management team at First Bank. And so is what made a great advisor great in 1995 and what makes them great in 2026, is that still kind of the same thing, or is that different?
Some things are the same, some are different. So let me drill down on that a little bit. So when you say excellent advisor, I can think back. So I first started working at a brokerage firm in 1990. So that's 36 years ago. Excellent advisors, the ones that might have been at the top of the office, the biggest producers, a lot of them offered their clients access to things that other brokers didn't offer them access to. So it might have been products or information or whatever, think again, this is pre-internet even, this is, to quote Dan Pink, we've gone from caveat emptor to caveat venditor, let the seller beware now. So a lot of what might have looked like excellent advisors were simply executing on a platform that some of their competitors didn't have. They had unique product set. Maybe like in my world, one of our competitive advantages at AG Edwards was we had excellent access to municipal bonds, which I originated, that you couldn't get at other firms. So some of our excellent advisors might have been giving excellent advice, but they might have also just been the go-to place to get muni bonds that you couldn't get anywhere else, or education, or a high level of service, or whatever. It's difficult to tease out the conditions that existed then that would have made you, quote, excellent. There's one thing that I think is constant throughout all of that with respect to excellence, and that is quality of relationship. The excellent advisors have great relationships, always have, always will have. The difference is now that because of the ubiquity of information and the ease of access, the quality of the relationship now is more dependent on outcomes that are dependent on advice and expertise. So I think, and this is one of the reasons why I started a wealth management program when I was on faculty at WashU, and why we're doing similar things at Purdue Daniels now, the bar has risen for the technical acumen that you have to be an excellent advisor. And that's very much the products have gotten more complicated, tax laws gotten more complicated. And a lot of the stuff that you used to teach your clients about, they don't need to be taught about now. They know it. They can see it on TikTok or on a website elsewhere, a YouTube video or Investopedia or something like that. But that consistency of quality relationships has not changed. And I don't think that will ever change because people buy from humans, people trust humans. Humans have empathy that a machine, at least today, can't have, maybe in 30 years, I don't know, pick a time frame. But in any event, that's been constant. And probably if we went back 100 years, Alex, it was similar.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you're saying, like on the education piece too, before I think we were saying the clients are coming more informed because they went to Investopedia and they read about 529 plans. But now they're putting 529 plans into an agent that understands a lot about them, their background, their education level, how they process the world. And they're saying, it could be a third grade teacher who's saying, help me understand 529 plans in a way through a lens that I personally will understand. So it's like the general knowledge was sort of the last couple decades, but now I just don't think you can educate better than an AI on some of these individual topics for someone who wants to go on there and learn.
I think if you're looking for, I don't want to say generic education because, the case you just outlined, it can be fairly specific to my unique circumstances, but I can fill out all the risk questionnaires in the world for an advisor, and it still doesn't get at, in my soul, how risk averse am I? What other qualitative aspects of risk might exist in my life that are hard to quantify, that are hard to even express, that are hard to get into the AI agent for it to cogitate on. So this will sound cliche, but the IQ piece of the business is a race to the bottom. Okay. And so when it was robos putting together portfolios, whatever that was 10 years ago that everyone is freaking out about robos, I can ask a robo to put together a portfolio of mutual funds, probably as good or maybe better than a human could do. But guess what? There's still people buying portfolios of mutual funds from human advisors that do other things. But the IQ piece of it, so now I don't have to necessarily spend a lot of time constructing that portfolio and explaining it to a client. It frees me up to talk about other things like legacy, like financial planning and whatnot. So it puts a higher burden on IQ. And then what it does is it clips the market. I had this philosophy when I was running the JP Morgan private bank office. I suggested to my advisors that they ought to qualify leads based not so much on size. Size was the first aspect, but complexity was the more important one. So find the people that have the most complex lives, because that's where you're going to be able to, one, let them outsource complexity to you to handle. Two, likely have an idea for them that's going to save them money. And three, likely have an idea that they haven't thought of and no other firm would have thought of because we had such excellent resources at JP Morgan to do that. So $1 million portfolio, maybe that goes to a robo. Maybe that client is perfectly served by an AI. My kids would probably be perfectly served by an AI saying, I've got a 401k plan at work and here's 10 investment options. Which one should I pick? Instead of calling an advisor and paying an advisor to do that. So what's the silver lining in that as the market kind of bifurcates into complex where people need humans and I'll say kind of down market? Well, the silver lining is that guess what? Complexity is on the increase. Wealth is on the increase, and wealth is being transferred. As I don't need to cite all the statistics about the coming wealth transfer from the boomers to their kids. And every time there's a wealth transfer, that gives an advisor an opportunity to provide valuable advice. So I'm bullish on the wealth management business. I'm bullish on it for students just now going. I get this question all the time, Alex, from students. Like, should I really be studying to be a wealth manager? Like, maybe I'll be out of business in 20 years. I think not.
Yeah, I agree with you. The clients with more money and the clients with more complexity will be the clients that are the most reliant on advisors the longest. And I think that does require a different skill set of advisors, and it requires them to raise their game. If you want to work with someone with $100 million, they're going to have a complex situation. They're going to have a higher bar for coming to you for advice. Like we talk about Taylor Swift because she cares about legacy. And so when we talk about advisors getting comfortable talking about legacy, we say that because there's really no ceiling on legacy. It doesn't matter if it's me and you who have never, had a $1 billion music tour, or Taylor, we both care about legacy. But I don't know if you have 5 minutes to pitch Taylor Swift and you start with financial planning, you're probably going to get like 4 minutes and 50 seconds back, or Social Security or whatever. You have to sort of raise your bar as to what you're providing to these people.
Let's think about what problem an advisor is solving. Okay, so I mentioned like the excellent advisors 30 years ago. One of the problems they solved was access to product. No longer an issue. One of the problems they solved was education about investment alternatives. No longer an issue. One of the problems was portfolio construction. Well, robos kind of solve that. So what problem are we solving? I still think a lot of advisors have a fairly outdated approach. They don't fully know what problem they solve. I think the move toward planning and all of the planning tools and, maybe an increased focus on things like CFP are valuable because they're more problem focused than product focused. But I still think there are a lot of people, to your point about Taylor Swift, before you have that meeting, you got to think, what problem does somebody like her have that I can uniquely solve? This was an interesting thing, again, I'll go back to that Edward Jones case that I wrote. So they have 20,000 advisors, something like that, making 1 million calls a year on clients. And as you know from their business model, they people in rural areas, small towns and whatnot, they have advisors that are new. And to prep for a call on, let's say, a school teacher, they may have never called on a school teacher. So they can use AI to say, like, what are the problems that school teachers typically have based on the 100,000 calls my colleagues have made on school teachers?
Right. That's right. Yeah.
So now, think about this. So this would be my response to a student. So you crunch that in AI. You say, I'm going to call in a school teacher who's 40 that makes this salary, that has something, a retirement plan and TIA CREF, and is married to somebody that does this, that, and the other thing. Now I can go in completely prepared for somebody that, absent that AI tool, I would have been completely unprepared. I would have maybe done the classic, show up and throw up kind of thing and just like start spewing features and, things that I think might get your attention. But now I can come in with, do you have this problem? I can solve it. Here's how I would solve it. Think about the reduction in failure rate for a new advisor. Just something like that, getting them ramped that much faster, reducing the learning curve, reducing the friction, maybe moving closing from 5 calls to 3 calls or something like that. How you could say that AI is a bad thing in that context. It's clearly a great thing.
Right.
This is what allowed advisors to be excellent advisors was experience. They'd seen it all. Well, now you can see it all as the newbie.
Yeah. Right.
So it comes back to what problem are you trying to solve? I wanted to come back to another example. When you asked me about the internet, I was going to use another example is the ATM.
I was just talking to someone about this. Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone thought ATM was going to be the end of retail banking. And, there's more branches now than there used to be. And big banks like JP Morgan are actually opening new branches, modernizing them. And what we see in all of the data is that, some people would like to I would prefer to use an ATM or a chat bot than to get on the phone with somebody. But other people want to walk into a branch and work with a human or be on the phone with a human or have a video call like this. with a human. The proportions might change, but it's not going to be 100% of people want to deal with machines.
I was talking about this with the ATMs because they said, there's still bank tellers. They exist. Now, if you met someone who was a bank teller, you might be like, it's interesting. Didn't know, it's not a ton of bank tellers anymore. So they have to be good at what they're doing. I wonder, there's 300,000 advisors in the United States today. A bunch of them are going to retire, and I want to talk about that in a second. But
yes,
as I think about the advisors, of those 300,000, AI is more of a risk to the, if you were ranking them all, 290,512, it's much more of a risk than advisor that's that's truly in the top 1,000, 10,000, 50,000 of advisors doing their job. In whatever way you want to say they're doing their job, like they have great clients, they have a stable business, their clients love them and they refer business, all this kind of stuff. Those top 100, 150,000 advisors, to me, it's going to be a really long time before AI can even sniff what they're doing, versus you take the bottom half of that profession. I think this is probably true of the lawyers, all these professions where, if you're at a law firm with 100 lawyers, the top 5 are never getting replaced. And then number 6 through 60 are probably safe for a really long time. But if you're lawyer number 99, that isn't really adding value to the firm or doing something special or working hard or growing or whatever, I do think there is risk for those people.
I definitely agree with that. And I mean, that's, part of creative destruction. That's the, natural process of things in an innovative capitalist system. So I think that's a good thing. That's capitalistic Darwinism, if you will. All the advisors in the aggregate get better. So definitely some advisors will fall by the wayside, if you will. That said, we've been talking about disintermediation for decades. And I think back to when WebMD came out, everybody said, well, no one will go to the doctor anymore. They'll just go on WebMD. Well, you still want to go to a doctor because even if actually WebMD probably causes more problems than it solves because it makes people think they have the most fatal disease when they have a cough.
Right.
But you still go to a doctor. And that may be an extreme example because, your health could be a matter of life and death, literally, whereas your portfolio probably not so much. So maybe you want to trust your health to a machine a little bit less. But there's actually some research that shows that doctors aided by AI, they provide better diagnoses than doctors unaided by AI, but not better than AI on their own. So
right.
I'm going to a conference in a couple of months where this is going to be a topic. So I'm looking forward to learning more about that because I do think there's a lot of analogous learning to be applied to financial advisory. But, that's one thing, the WebMD, but then real estate brokers would be the other one.
Right.
Here's a good contrast. Real estate brokers are doing just fine. Travel agents are a thing of the past.
Yeah.
Let's think about what is the problem a real estate agent solves versus the problem a travel agent solves. Travel agents mostly provided access to reservation schedules. Real estate agents, find you a home for your family.
Yeah.
It's a very different personal kind of thing. So I think advisors are more like real estate agents. And I'm sure there are many real estate agents that left the business because it's gotten more competitive and there are still some online ways to buy a house and all of that.
But things take time.
They do.
I want to talk about Danny Meyer for a second because he's a St. Louis native and you wrote a case study about Union Square Hospitality Group, his group. There's a number of books, like he has the Setting the Table book, his protege, Gardner, but he wrote Unreasonable Hospitality. I feel like there's opportunity for advisors to lean into some of the lessons that Danny is speaking about in his culture and the way that they treat people in their restaurants. And I want to know maybe if you agree or disagree that there's some room for unreasonable hospitality in wealth management.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on this point. I think, here it's a matter of how do I scale it and where do I draw the line?
Okay.
It's harder, and there are some direct analogies to the hospitality business or the food service business. It's a lot harder to provide a high touch concierge level of service at McDonald's than at Lutece, just because of the economics.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, to talk about another Danny Meyer, he founded Shake Shack, and Shake Shack implemented kiosk ordering in their restaurants. And at first, some people said, isn't that kind of the opposite of enlightened hospitality? Like
Mm.
you're giving someone a machine instead of a human that greets you with, hello, Mr. Kirby, thanks for coming back. How might I help you? And you're giving them a kiosk. And this is a direct analogy to the way technology and AI can be used in financial services. Quite the contrary, what they said was, we're just going to reallocate the humans to even higher touch, higher value activities in our Shake Shacks. So rather than have someone stand at a cash register and take your order and make change or run your credit card or whatever, that person now can walk through the restaurant and say, is everything okay? Is there anything I can get for you? How are you enjoying your meal? Would you like some dessert? Something like that. Or I see your kids are restless. Can we get your kid a free ice cream cone or something like that? Kind of like Will did. There's that famous story of him getting a sled for one of the customers at a restaurant because a family had been in town and had never seen snow and the kids had never been sledding. So he arranged for them. I mean, they simply ate in his restaurant and he arranged a sledding trip.
I was in New York for a meeting. Our VP of marketing is there. I took her to the Modern, which is a Danny Meyer restaurant in MoMA, just to say, because I had given her the book. I was like, you know what's more fun than a book is just eating in wonderful restaurants. We were just talking. I was telling her about this restaurant that my wife and I went to in Nashville called the Catbird Seat. And at the end of Catbird Seat, they had an artist. I don't know if they do this all the time or whatever, but they had an artist draw the menu. So everything that was on the menu was drawn in, like, there was like a baked potato and all of our appetizers, everything, all this stuff. It was so cool. And my wife, because we were there for like an anniversary or something, she framed it and it's in our kitchen and she loves it. And it's like this great memory that we have. I was just telling our VP of marketing about this. And then at the end of our dinner, they came over with a copy, like a beautiful copy of the menu, the meal that we had ate that night. And in the Setting the Table book, he talks about the importance of the people in the restaurant just listening at a different level, really listening between the lines of, it's in a lot of ways, it's eavesdropping, but eavesdropping from a place of like care and hospitality. Because most of the time when you ask people, if you're a wealth advisor, you ask your clients like, hey, what else can we do to serve you better? They're not going to give you an answer. Right? They're just going to be like, no, Rich, it's great. Everything you're doing is great. But listening for different things that they're talking about, like maybe what they're saying when they're walking into your office, like, really, my daughter's really struggling to get this thing, or that she has prom coming up and we couldn't. And like in these little sort of in the margins, to me, when you read these books, it brings out the creativity of people. And that's where I think you can create some really special experiences as a wealth advisor.
That's a wonderful story that you say that eavesdropping is sort of like listening attentively from a distance for an opportunity to be helpful. It's like if you've ever been in a nice restaurant and you drop your fork, there's somebody whose ear is tuned to the sound of a fork falling on the floor and turning immediately and running over with a fork.
100%.
Or picking up the napkin after when you get up to go to the restroom or something like that. So there are a lot of opportunities for that. I can give you one example. This was, I don't think, a particularly novel trick that I used, but we had a lot of clients at JP Morgan that were saving for college. We would talk about different college costs and, make projections and all of that. And because while I was working at JP Morgan, was also teaching at a college and knew a lot of people at a lot of other colleges and had 4 kids myself that attended colleges. I would always say, if there's anything I can do to help with the college search or college readiness, let me know, because I have a lot of friends in that space. And I routinely set up tours, or, I've got this econ professor at this college, would your daughter like to talk to them to understand more about what it means to study economics at an Ivy League school or something like that? So that's just one example, and you've probably seen, I've probably done this with you and for you. Same thing with listening attentively to when people speak, to see if there's a connection you can make to another person or some information that would be useful. So the word I use is curate. Be constantly thinking about, what can I curate for that person? So this actually came up just in one of the roles I have at Purdue, where I run our executive education program. And one of our clients was saying, I saw this announcement about this new initiative in Indiana with this company in Indiana, and I thought there might be an opportunity for my company there. And I said, well, I happen to know a lot of people at that company, so let me know if it would be useful to you and I can make a connection. And that was just like we were having polite chit chat, waiting for everybody else to join the call. And this is sort of like talking about the weather or the box score from the night before or something. They said, I saw your state's doing this cool thing. Okay, I can be helpful there. That's goodwill you're building in that, social capital account with that client. And a lot of advisors don't do that, or maybe they do it gratuitously.
The follow through of what you're saying, that's also opportunities to just show, when we're hiring people, we look for those behavioral signals. When someone sends a thank you, I told your students, we were looking for an intern. We interviewed a lot of different young people. We weren't going to hire an intern until we really knew that we had the right fit, because it wasn't like the company wasn't going to be fine if we didn't hire an intern in the next 2 weeks. And then we found this one intern, and she showed up to the meeting with like 4 or 5 slides customized to total family, and said, hey, I did some research on the company. I had some questions and I had some thoughts. Would you mind if I share them? I was like, please, I love this. And then sent a thank you note to me and to our chief of staff after. And she was the only person that sent a follow-up thank you, the only person out of all the other people that we interviewed. And so to me, those 2 behavioral things, I can't even tell you really like what she said in the interview. To me, the behaviors really show people like what you're about to as an advisor.
Yeah, I'm taking some notes here, because as you know, as one of my guest lecturers, and thank you for telling that story that you mentioned to my students, my guests bring a lot of really great kernels of wisdom to class. So I have told my students something similar, is that when you're in sales, the marketing or selling process is a trial run of how you will behave when you're a vendor to the client. Okay. So that courtship is indicative of the marriage, if you will. Okay. And one of my guests said this, and I had never heard it put this way, and I thought this was a great way to put it. He said, until you have an order, you are the product. I had never heard that before. So the client, they all saw people buy from whom they like.
So good.
So the prospect is getting to know Alex based on, is Alex pleasant and affable and on time? Does he follow up? Does he respond urgently, et cetera? Because in a vendor, I want somebody that's going to have grace under pressure and be responsive and make me feel like I'm their only client. And I can see that in the marketing process. Do they meet all the deadlines? Do they set reasonable expectations and exceed them and all of that? So I thought this, until you have an order, you are the product. Now, I also harp on, not only in my sales management class, but in my class for freshmen, future investment bankers, I said 2 things that my experience, 40 years of working, most people, including people in business, including people that are relatively successful, don't do. They don't follow up and they don't act with urgency. I say, if you just do those two things, you're ahead of so many people.
Yeah.
I had a manager at Bank of America who used to say 90% of leadership is showing up and just be present, be at the thing, support your team. And following up and urgency are similar. The more urgently you ask or you follow up when asked to do something, the more that communicates how important that request is to you. So urgency is, and then follow up, same way. If you say you're going to do something and somebody doesn't hear from you for 2 weeks, they think I don't matter. So following up and urgency. So one of my guest lecturers uses this acronym, SUSUFU, SUSUFU, and it stands for set up, show up, and follow up. I love that because I was drilled early in my career, prep for every call. So set up well, know your client, know what you're going to say. If you're going in with a team, know who's going to say what we're not going to say. Set up, then show up, be prepared, be on time, be early, and then follow up. So I like that SUSUFU. So I was telling you about our team presentations. A number of the teams mentioned SUSUFU, like that really stuck. So I love that. I love it. I love
cool.
a good initialism. So SUSUFU, set up, show up, follow up. If I could, let me go back to the scaling point. It's hard to scale, as I mentioned. So that where revenue is constrained, where account size is small, it's going to be hard to provide that concierge level of service. So that's where AI can help that. If I take out costly humans and do some of that, that'll help me scale. You see all manner of firms now moving toward the high end of the market. So, JP Morgan has those financial centers. I visited one and posted about it on LinkedIn about a year ago. Really nice furniture, nice artwork, croissant, coffee and espresso and all of that. And that's part of the hospitality. And it's in a very homey environment. The conference rooms are, look like libraries, literally. So everyone is doing that. Problem is it's expensive. So you can only do it for higher end clients. And now you're seeing services that also do that.
It's harder to do that better than JP Morgan, right? They have more money, more resources. If they're doing something like that, you might not want to fast follow on some of those things because it's going to be really hard to buy nicer furniture and have nicer croissants than JP Morgan Chase. They have the best croissants.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody at maybe a year or so ago at a firm that was looking at launching into the high net worth space for the reasons we've been discussing, size and complexity. I said, well, just be careful because that is not a business where it's just a few more zeros. That is a business where it's a different set of problems you're trying to solve and a different expectation level. You're then competing with, the product set's different, some of the amenities, if you will, if you're going to do events, your tickets have to be on the 50-yard line, not just in the stadium. You have to have the better wine at the reception, all of those things. So it's a space that it's not for the faint of heart. And those relationships, the higher, more complex relationships are the ones that are the hardest to dislodge for relationship reasons, because you've invested a lot of time in training your advisor on your situation. You don't want to lightly exit that and have to train a new one. But there are also oftentimes tax consequences to moving a relationship, which makes it prohibitively expensive as a math matter to do it. So that's a tough space to just jump into and think you're going to have any traction anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of these firms are served to ask themselves if they can do something really well. If you're a family office that's like trying to say we help clients with private aviation, there's companies that do that really well, or travel in general. Amex Black does travel really well. And so I think as you're looking at the service, it's easy sort of to say like, we do everything, just tell us what you need. But to your point about the scalability of it all, I don't know if you can do everything really well. And I don't know if you can certainly scale all the things that you would do if you had just had one client with $1 billion.
I think you have to make a conscious decision as a firm and as an advisor. Are you going to be a jack of all trades and a master of none? Or are you going to be an outsourcer and an integrator of some of these services? I literally had clients that had advisors, that often have multiple advisors. They'd have advisors that would go to their house in Naples and shut it down for the summer. We didn't do that. We wouldn't pick out your new tile. We just didn't choose to do that.
Yeah.
Some firms want to do that. You need to think about that. You need to think about whether you're going to make that or buy that. Can I come back to one other point on your hospitality thing? This is,
Yeah.
it's related, but it's a little bit different. So, I used to run a wealth management group at a community bank, and I came up with a tagline for our wealth management business, which was sleep better, dream bigger. It absolutely said nothing about what we did. And that's what I loved about it. It didn't say we were a bank. It didn't say we provided stocks and bonds and planning. Like, what do we do? Well, what we do is help you sleep better and dream bigger. And what do people really want? They want a good night's sleep. They don't want to worry about if their kids can go to college, if they're going to outlive their money, if they're going to have a dignified retirement, or if they have a special needs child, who's going to take care of them. They want to sleep better. And they don't want to have to worry about every day looking at their money and figuring out what's going on with it. And then what else do they want? They'd like to know that maybe tomorrow could be a little bit better than today, or that maybe things could be better for their kids than they were for them. They want to dream. So if I do say so myself, I love that tagline because it literally said,
I like it
that's
too.
the elevator pitch. What do you do? Well, we help our clients sleep better and dream bigger.
Yeah, I really like it.
I could tell you how we do that, all the different ways we do that. That's a longer conversation. And I don't think it came off as cliche. We literally would drill, what keeps you up at night? That'd be the first question you'd ask in a meeting. Okay, that's a problem. That's a pain point I can focus on.
Any of these things can be cliche. It's just is there authenticity behind it? And certainly there's I know that you're pitching that idea from a place of authenticity. You can hear just when you're talking about it that it's in there. I want to close on this maybe. McKinsey says that 110,000 advisors are retiring in the next 10 years. To me, there's kind of two parts to it. One is it going to be a one-to-one replacement of advisors? They say there's going to be an advisor shortage. I don't know if I'm totally there, that it's going to be a one-to-one replacement. But then we have these young people coming in, and to me, they have a different perspective than other advisors. It takes me 50% as long to explain total family and legacy to female advisors and to advisors that are under 45. And they have a different perspective in terms of the value that they want to provide. So to me, there is tremendous opportunity in this profession for young people to make a really good living, to have a good life, to impact other people, a lot of the things that young people are looking for. And so my question to you is, do you buy advisor shortage or not? And then when you're talking to these young people at Purdue or people you're mentoring, what advice would you give to someone who's starting out in the profession or maybe on the fence should I really go into this because all these people are telling me wealth advisors aren't going to exist or whatever. So I would love to close with that if we could.
Well, I think a couple of things on that. One is you have retirements. Do I think there's going to be a shortage? Probably not, because I think markets are pretty efficient, so we'll know pretty quickly if we're running low on advisors, and we'll have more advisors coming into the business. So I think for young people, the fact that so many are retiring and the average age is whatever it is, 64 years old or something like that, whatever Cerulli says, that creates a lot of opportunity. I also, back to the point I made earlier, there's a lot of wealth creation in this country. And even though maybe population is not growing, there's a lot of wealth. We're a very wealthy country, and things are only getting more complicated. And I think people are increasingly skeptical of big institutions. So let me put it this way. This is going to sound a little bit counterintuitive. It's like the polls that say, 90% of all people have a low opinion of Congress, but they have a high opinion of their congressperson.
That's Rich. That's such a good example. I know exactly what you're saying. That is a really good example.
I don't have at my fingertips the research on this, but people will say like, "Oh, Wall Street is a big problem. The big banks are evil or whatever."
Yeah.
But I love my advisor.
Yes. That is universally true.
Yeah, I mean, I think most people complain about the healthcare system, but they love their primary care physician. So that's the same thing. I mean, people are going to go to their doctor. People are going to go to their advisor. Not all people, but frankly, like what is, I know, because I ran an office and I ran a business and I worked in this business forever. The mantra that every CEO of every financial firm says is, let's try to have bigger clients and let's move small clients online. So the mantra is, let's have the bigger clients.
I've yet to meet a wealth advisor who's looking for clients with less money.
Right.
It just doesn't exist.
Yeah. So, that's the whole industry is gonna go that way. There may be some further fee compression. I think there'll be less drudgery as a result of AI. Most importantly, I think there will be better outcomes for clients. And that's why you go into the business, is to deliver an outcome for a client that allows them to live their dreams through their financial plan. That's why you do it, to be at the kids' college graduation, your client's kids, to send flowers when your client has a baby. I just heard a story recently of a advisor, day after a funeral, resolving mom's financial situation successfully amongst 3 siblings. That is like the siblings were grieving and needed help. You're not going to punch that into an AI robot and get an answer. The business is going to be different, but there's plenty of opportunity. We see it time and time again.
And they still need more female advisors. Still.
Absolutely.
The amount of wealth that women are going to control, women outlive their husbands by 6 or 7 years. All that money is going to women before it goes to the next generation. Women are voting with their feet. They're leaving these advisors in droves. I think as the profession continues to evolve into more emotional, human, psychological, behavioral stuff, women have a higher level of emotional intelligence. If you just take the average woman and the average male, I'm fine going out on that limb saying that. And there's not enough female advisors. And so I think this profession isn't just for 22-year-old males who like to golf, right? There is a need for more female advisors. And it is a really good profession for those people where you can go and make a change. So I don't know how many of those students who come to you are male versus female, but it seems to me like that's still a growing need.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Rich, next time I see you, I hope it's over a meal of unreasonable hospitality. I'm so happy I got to be in front of your class and that we've stayed connected here over the years. You're really just a wonderful leader in the space, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, Alex, I appreciate it. And I know one thing, you will never be replaced by AI because you're one of a kind and you're on a mission. And I'm happy to have contributed to, in some small way, to the success of your company. So Godspeed to you. Good luck.
Thanks, Rich.
Take care.
That's it for Visionary Advisor. Thank you to our guest and to Total Family, whose software is helping advisors do legacy better. If you're a fan of Visionary Advisor, please subscribe and share it with another top-notch wealth advisor like yourself. I'll see you next time.